Welcome back to the Basics of Git. Today we're going to go over what Git is, installing Git, and also configuring Git. So let's get started. So what is Git? Git is a distributed version control system designed to handle everything from small to very large projects with speed and efficiency. Git was created by Linus Torvalds in 2005 and is widely used in software development industry due to its robust feature set, flexibility, and performance. Unlike traditional version control systems, Git provides every developer with a complete copy of the entire repository, including its full history, which allows for seamless collaboration and a high level of redundancy. One of the core features of Git is its ability to create and manage branches. Branches in Git are lightweight and easy to create, allowing developers to experiment with new features or fixes without affecting the main code base. This makes it simple to test new ideas, develop features in isolation, and then merge them back into the main branch once they're ready. Git's branching model encourages workflows that enhance productivity and reduce risks, such as feature branching, where each feature is developed in its own branch and then integrated only after it's thoroughly tested and reviewed. Git also excels in performance, with most operations being performed locally, which makes it extremely fast. The distributed nature of Git means that the network performance is less of a bottleneck since developers can work offline and sync their changes when they are back online. Additionally, Git uses efficient algorithms to compress and store data, which helps to minimize the size of the repository and improve the speed of operations. With a strong emphasis on data integrity, Git ensures that the history of your project remains accurate and intact, making it a reliable tool for version control in modern software development. So now that we understand some of the benefits of Git, let's go ahead and install it on our machine. So I have a Mac, but I'm going to show you first how to install it on Windows, and then I'll move over to Mac because there's a couple different ways you can do it for Mac. So for Windows, we're just going to go ahead and go to git-scm.com, and that's going to bring us to the main Git website. And you'll see on the right hand side, it's going to detect your machine type. So mine's Mac, so it's going to say download for Mac over here. But you can also go to this downloads button. And inside the downloads button, you'll have downloads for Mac OS, Windows, and Linux Unix. So for Windows users, you're just going to click on Windows, or it might be over here on the right hand side. It might say download for Windows. You're going to go ahead and download that, and you're going to go ahead and install it and just follow the prompts. And that's pretty much it for Windows. So for Mac, we've got a couple different ways we can do this. The first way is almost identical to Windows. You can just download the Git file from the Git website, and then usually, so Windows has a .exe file, an executable file. Mac has a .dmg file. They do the same thing. They're just labeled differently because Mac's operating system's a little bit different. So once you download that, you'll double click on the .dmg file, and that'll prompt the install of Git. Now there's a second way we can install Git, and that's in our terminal inside of Mac. So let's go ahead and open that up real quick. So the first way to open up the terminal is to hold the command button and hit spacebar at the same time, and that's going to open up your Spotlight search. And in here you can type the word terminal, and that first option there for applications terminal is going to be that. That's going to pop open a terminal window for you. The other way to do this would be to open up your Launchpad. And from the Launchpad, you can go ahead and search for terminal, just like you would in the Spotlight search, and that should be the very first thing that pops up. So let's go ahead and switch over to our terminal screen now that we have it open. So the very first way I'm going to show you how to install Git on Mac is through Homebrew, which is a package manager. So if you don't have Homebrew installed yet, there's a really quick and easy way to do that. And I went ahead and included that in the installing Git section of this course. So you can go ahead and click through there and copy the code. But I'm just going to go ahead and show you real quick in terminal how to do that. It's through this /bin/bash-c and then a curl with a long URL for the install. And this is going to install Homebrew directly onto the machine globally, so that way you have access to it regardless of where you are on the computer. And then once you have that installed, you can go ahead and move on to the next step, which will be to use Homebrew to install Git, which we're going to do here in just a second. It's going to be brew install Git. And that's going to be how you install Git on the machine. I've already installed it, so I don't need to go through these steps right now. But that's the very first way you can go ahead and install Git, and that'll install it globally on your computer. So that way you have access to it, regardless of if you're doing this through terminal here on the computer or in a terminal window in your text editor. Regardless of where you're at, you'll have access to Git. Now, once you install Git and have it completely installed on your machine, you'll want to check to make sure and verify that Git has been installed. So all you're going to do is type git space dash dash version and hit enter. And this is going to tell you what Git version you're currently on. And that just confirms that Git has been installed on your machine. So now that we've installed Git on our machine, now we need to configure it. Some of these configurations don't necessarily need to be done right now. I'm just going to go through all of them up front with you, and then you can pick and choose which ones you want to configure up front. So the first one to configure would be your name and your email address for Git. And this would be to let Git know who is doing the commits and the merges and everything else during the version control process. So the first one is going to be setting your name, which is going to be git config global user.name and then your name in quotes. So it would be, for me, it would be Chris Kendig, like that. And that would set globally for Git your name for all commits and merges and any actions you take basically in the version control system. The second one is the email address. It's going to be similar to the name, except instead of user.name, it's going to be user.email and then your email address. And that's going to go ahead and set the email address associated with commits and merges and everything else in the version control system. The next item we're going to configure, and this one I would actually suggest leaving alone for now until you get more comfortable with Git and terminal and everything, is the default text editor for Git. Right now, I don't have this set. I have it set to what Git's default is, which is Vim. It's part of the terminal when you're going through the process, and I've gotten used to the commands for that. And that's what I'll be showing you as we progress through these lessons. So I would suggest leaving this alone, but you can always update this later as well. And that's just going to be git config global core.editor and then code dash dash wait. And you can replace the code dash dash wait with the appropriate command with whatever you want. But this is how you would change the default editor. The next thing we're going to go over is setting up aliases. And an alias, all that is basically a shortcut key for different commands in Git. Again, I would suggest leaving this alone for now and not setting any shortcuts until you get more comfortable with the system and understand what you're doing and what the commands actually do. So I'll go through them again just so you can see what an example of this is, but I would suggest leaving these alone for now. So all these are going to be very similar. It's just the only thing that's going to change is the alias name and the command associated with that alias name. So this would be git config global alias dot, and then after that dot is the shortcut letters and numbers that you would like for that command, and then the command name, which in this case is status. So as you can see, we shortened status to st for this alias. So when you go and look up a status for your Git repository, you'd have to do is get st rather than get status. Again, I wouldn't set these being brand new. I would go ahead and leave them as is. And then as you get more comfortable as a developer, you can go ahead and set these later. I still don't have these set, and I've been doing this for 7+ years. I just use the full name of everything just because there's really not much of a reason to set these, but it's there for you in case you do want to set them. Now, some best practices for Git would be, the first one would be consistent user information. You want to ensure that your username and your email are consistently configured across all your devices and your repositories. this just helps maintain a clear and accurate commit history. Say you had two different email addresses, and on one machine you have your first email address set in your Git, and in the second machine you have your other email address set in your Git repository, but you're committing to the same repository. You're going to have commits that come from both email addresses then, even though it's just you committing both of those. So go ahead and make sure that your name and your email address are consistent across all of those. The second thing, and this is something that we'll cover later on, is using an SSH key for authentication. And the SSH key is just a little bit more secure than the HTTPS cloning process, and it avoids people being able to get into your repository that you don't want in your repository, because they have to have that SSH key in order to get in. So we'll go over that later when we get into GitHub. But for now, just understand that you'll probably at some point want the SSH key set up. The third thing would be to enable the color output for your terminal. And all this does is it color codes different things with Git as it's printing out into your terminal. So that line for configuring the color output is just git config dash dash global color.ui auto. And that's just going to allow those color coding outputs to happen. It does help. It really visually it does help, especially when you start getting possibly like an error somewhere and stuff like that while you're committing. It's a lot easier to see if you've got your color output set. And then the other thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to configure a git ignore file. And what a git ignore file does is it's actually exactly what the name suggests. It's a list of file names that Git will ignore and not commit when you commit your branch or your project to the Git repository. For basic websites, there's not much that you would do a git ignore for. But when you start getting into projects like React.js, Next.js, all different libraries like that involve JavaScript, there's a folder called node modules that gets installed that you do not want to commit over to your repository because it's usually pretty massive and it eats up a lot of space. So that's where you would put the name of that folder inside the git ignore file. And then Git will automatically understand that it's not to commit that folder or that directory when you do your commits. And that's going to do it for Basics of Git. Remember, if you do get stuck along the way, we do have a community section attached to the course. And if you click on the questions and answers channel, you can ask your questions there and I'll be happy to help you out. For our next module, we're going to go through working with Git repositories. And that's going to include initializing a repository, adding and committing changes, and viewing repository status. See you there.